So this is a letter from an 8th grader. Dear Coach, my name is Malaika Underwood. I am interested in attending your school. I am in the 8th grade and I am presently attending the O'Farrell Community School, Center for Advanced Academic Studies. I am in the process of choosing what high school I would like to attend. I am a young lady, 14 years of age. I am interested in playing baseball, not softball. Last year, I played on the Choya's Lake Senior Minor team for 13 and 14-year-olds. I'm a pitcher and second basewoman. Last year, I batted third in the order, hitting .557. We played a total of 25 games. I had 61 at-bats and 34 hits. I made no errors at second and had an ERA of 1.85 as a pitcher. I presently play for the Choya's Lake Senior Major team for 14 and 15-year-olds. We are currently playing games. We will start the Tournament of Champions in about a week. After the tournament, I will begin games for All-Stars. Now that you know a little bit about me, I would like to let you know that I don't expect some special placement or treatment, but I do expect a fair chance. I would like to know if you have anything against women playing on your high school team. Has any girl tried out for your high school football and/or baseball team? Has any girl ever made the team? I would appreciate if you would write me with the answers to these questions and anything you would like to tell me about the school, yourself, the athletic program at your school, or your team. Thanks for taking the time to read and reply to my letter. Thanks, Malaika Underwood. Welcome to Glorious Professionals, brought to you by GoRuck Media. I'm Jason, here with Emily in our kitchen in Atlantic Beach, Florida, with our dear friend and guest today, Malaika Underwood. Malaika is Senior Vice President of Licensing at One Team Partners, where she is tasked with providing oversight for the company's growing licensing business and positioning the company to deliver value to college athletes as the NCAA landscape changes. She was recently named one of the Sports Business Journal's 40 Under 40. Underwood, who is a scholarship volleyball player at the University of North Carolina, Go Heels, is currently the longest tenured player on a USA baseball national team, male or female. She has earned 5 Women's Baseball World Cup medals, as well as 2 Women's Baseball World Cup all-tournament team selections. In 2015, Underwood was honored by USA Baseball as the Sportswoman of the Year. She lives in Atlantic Beach, Florida, with her husband, Chris, and 2 daughters, Birdie and Kit, both of whom inspired Underwood to write her recently published children's book, Birdie Can Too. Today, we're excited to talk to her about her personal journey. Malaika, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
We remodeled our kitchen in honor of your coming over. Our kids are upstairs.
I love
asleep.
the setup.
What were you saying right before? It's
high end. This is high end.
Better than the garage.
I don't generally expect high end from you guys, but you brought it tonight.
We're not in the garage where we were running the podcast last year. We're not in the driveway, which is where you usually kick my ass in sandbag training and all that stuff. You know, the only time you don't is when you've got one of your kids in your arm while you're still doing, or both. Anyway, look, if you can't tell out there, this is one of our dearest friends, and it's fun to sort of chat. And per norm, just want to start with kind of how you grew up, what led you to become where you went and where you are.
Well, thank you for having me, because this is going to be fun. I grew up in San Diego, so I played outside all the time, and I loved baseball, and it just came naturally to me. And so that's the sport that, for me, it was what I wanted to do. I actually, just like most little boys, I wanted to be a professional baseball player. And so I dreamed of being the first.
Who was your favorite?
At the time, Greg Maddux.
Oh,
The
yeah.
Atlanta Braves. So I grew up an Atlanta fan.
Cubs first, right?
Well, he was a Cub first,
Yeah.
you're right.
I think you won the Cy Young there.
How do you have a baseball memory?
I'm from, you know what the first professional baseball team was?
Too.
First MLB team was?
Chicago White Sox?
No. Cincinnati Reds.
The Reds.
The Reds, of course it was.
Of course it was. Anyway, I'm sorry, I cut you off. You wanted to be the first.
So
Yes,
Greg
I actually
Maddux.
wanted to be a Greg Maddux type pitcher. That's what I grew up wanting to do. You know, I played Little League. I started playing T-ball just like everybody else. There were a couple girls on the team. I was pretty competitive. I know that's surprising to you guys. I can remember, actually, we were the Brown Bears, Choyas Lake, and I was playing second base, and there was a girl who played right field, pop fly, girl never caught anything that came near her.
Yeah.
She put her glove out, caught a ball, started jumping up and down, celebrating. I turned around, looked at her, and said, "Throw the ball in." Even at 6 years old, I was serious about baseball. So I continued to play, but as I continued to play, fewer and fewer girls were on the...
So did you grow up rich? Did you grow up poor? Were you on fancy places? Were you at sandlots? Were you like, what was the vibe back then?
Choice Lake was not high end. It was not anywhere near high end. No, I think the saying was something like, "Where the stars of tomorrow play today." That was on the sign as you pulled into the dirt road that led to the fields that were also mostly dirt, some grass in the outfield. Bad hops were common. And so, no, it was, solidly lower middle class neighborhood, lots of good people around. I mean, we played all the time, baseball all the time. We played, even if there were just two of us, we'd find a way to play baseball outside.
Like, were there fist fights? Was it safe? Was it unsafe? Was it...
I mean, I got in a few fights. I'm sure that doesn't surprise you or Emily. I know Emily has a fighter in her too. I know that. It was safe enough. It wasn't like Atlantic Beach, Florida.
But racially diverse.
It was diverse, yeah. There were actually a lot of mixed families. So my mom is Black and my dad is white. Both my sister and brother are adopted, so we had a pretty mixed family. But that was not uncommon for our neighborhood. A lot of diversity, there were a lot of kids my age, so we hung out a lot together, and I actually can remember going out somewhere or going to a game, going to the fields, and people not knowing which kids belonged to which parents, because we were always just kind of together. And a lot of us who were mixed race looked all the same. So they just thought we were one big family of like 12 kids who kind of ran around together.
So you're a little younger than us, but you still kind of had this same upbringing where we were kids that just got sent outside and come home at dark and wander around the neighborhood and go in packs.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I was actually known in the neighborhood I knew which families ate first. And so I would show up at one friend's house and they'd be like, "Oh, Malaika's here. Would you like to stay for dinner?" "Yes, of course." So I'd have a little dinner. Then I'd go across the street and the next family would be having dinner. "Oh, Malaika's here. Would you like to stay for dinner?" "Sure." And I'd eat. And then I'd go home and my parents, who were both working, would get home and we'd eat some more. So
you were, what, 100% tomboy?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100% tomboy. Jeans, T-shirt. I always wore my Choice Lake hat to school unless they told me I couldn't. I didn't start growing my hair long until middle school maybe. And then once I got to college, I chopped it off again and said, "What am I doing? This is so easy. I've got curly hair. Let me just roll with it."
So you have, there's obviously parents out listening to this. There's people our age that aren't parents. There's the next generation listening. I mean, what was freedom like in terms of growing up a kid? Because, I romanticize it about how we grew up. I'm just listening to you. I mean,
I want to hear about an adventure you got into, because I know there had to be something.
Well, you know what? So Choice Lake was actually a lake, man-made lake near our neighborhood, or near my house in our neighborhood. And there was a canyon. And we would go into that canyon all the time. And so talk about freedom, like we would roam, tell your parents, headed out. They're like, "Come home for dinner," and that's it. And we'd go look for snakes. We'd go run up and down the hill. We'd do things we weren't supposed to be doing.
Like what?
I'd rather not. I don't know if the statute of limitations has expired or not.
It's fine.
Come
Safe
on.
space. No one's going to know.
I mean, all right. So this is probably the worst thing that we did as kids. And now it's going to be on record. But there was an elementary school just up the street from us. And we knew where the teacher's lounge was. So we broke into the teacher's lounge, went into the fridge, and got their stash of popsicles and ice cream, and then took off and went home and ate it all. Surprisingly, I guess maybe not surprisingly because there was an alarm, the cops did come, and they were driving around the neighborhood looking for somebody who broke into the school, and it was us just sitting on our porch eating ice cream and popsicles.
Popsicle thief.
Did they ever put two and two together?
No, never.
No cameras, right?
No, cameras, no nothing.
I also broke into a house when I was little. And
What?
the cops did come.
Really?
Yes, and it was like, it's a long story. I'll get to it sometime later. But basically, my older cousin blamed all of us, and we were much younger, and they put all the blame on my 3-year-old brother. It was like such a joke. They were like, "Who's this Eric?" And he toddles out with like candy bar all over his face, and they're like, "Okay."
You're telling that story, and I'm actually picturing Geo.
Yeah, that's Eric's son.
Yeah, no. Well, there's something like you learn in those situations, right? Like you feel a little bad about it, but you also feel a little exhilarated.
There was something to the neighborhood being, the families being close to, because there was some level of safety in that, which let our parents give us the independence that we needed, which is something I really like about our neighborhood and our crew is there's, enough people that your kids can go out and kind of be out on their own, but they're being watched. But I say that loosely, like if something goes wrong, they'll be there.
You did this recently for me.
Yes, I did.
Our boys escaped from the house while I was in the shower. You were doing your workout, Jace, and Malaika calls me. She goes, "Your boys just ran by me, and I can't catch them because I got my kids." And I was like, "What? No, they're not. They're downstairs." And she's like, "Nope." So I had to go chase after them.
Well, when Jack rode by, he said, "Have you seen my dad?" And I said, "Yeah, he went that way." And I thought for a second, I said, "Where's your mom?" And he just kept going. I was like, "Oh, that's wrong answer, bud. Yeah. Wrong answer. You're up to no good."
That's the neighborhood protection.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's it.
Okay, so baseball is your heart.
Absolutely.
I love how you always said that baseball found you.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, tell us about being on the team.
It was pretty natural for me, and I honestly don't even know the origin story. I probably just told my parents, "Hey, I want to sign up for baseball," and they were like, "Okay, whatever, it's something to do." But once I started playing, I wouldn't stop. And you're right, Jason, it is my heart. Like whether it's watching it, playing it, coaching it, it's just a part of who I am. Pretty much why I start all stories with the fact that I grew up playing baseball because it's core to my being. It provided me a lot of opportunities, and every time I thought, "Oh, this might be the end," it showed up again. So skipping ahead a little bit, but I got through high school, played volleyball and basketball mostly because I didn't want to be just in a PE class. I was like, I played basketball in the neighborhood. I played volleyball before. This will be easy. Actually turned out to be really great opportunities for me. And so when I started to get recruited for those sports, I thought, well, here's the end of baseball. Like, that's it. And almost accepted it. Coached a bit through college, just little league to kind of stay close to it because it's core to who I am. And then I found out about USA Baseball almost by chance. It was in 2006, and they were fielding a team for the USA Baseball women's national team. I had no idea they had a national team. They had just started one in 2004. They were having open tryouts, going to the World Cup that year. I thought, I haven't played in a while. At that point, I left high school in 99, so it's 7 years later. And I'm like, well, could it be like riding a bike? Let me take some swings, have somebody hit me some ground balls, see if I can do this. And I made the team, and I haven't looked back.
Cool.
So, and then even within that context, like within USA Baseball, I've had a really long career playing, but I've also had the chance to coach some of the grassroots and youth stuff and contribute that way and work with the organization on other things. So it really has provided for me in a way that I don't know that anything else has in my life other than my husband.
Yeah. Chris, you just worked that one in.
Good save. But well, let's go. I want to talk about this letter a little bit because you've told me about it, that you've done it, but I had never read it before seeing it written in that book that has a chapter about you. And I read that, and I found it to be polite, but defiant and very strong-willed. And it doesn't surprise me knowing you now, but it is kind of remarkable to think that you were 13 years old when you wrote that. I want to hear about remembering that and what your thoughts are on it.
I say this in the most humble way. But as an adult now, I look back at that and I cannot believe at 13 I had the balls to write it. But at the same time, it felt so absolutely normal to me to write. And it was...
Baseball was life, right?
Yeah, it was what I wanted to do. And in that moment, I had a lot of people questioning me and saying, well, why don't you just switch to softball? Or if you want to go to college, you have to switch. So some of that defiance you sense is probably me projecting that a bit as if like, don't tell me I have to go do this thing that I don't want to do and I've never even played the game, and let me try to do what I want to do. And the responses were varied. I mean, some coaches said outright no, we have a softball team. Some were wishy-washy about it. I was fortunate that there were 2 coaches who were open to it. It was really inspired by my parents too, and specifically my mom. It's one of those things where I said, well, I want to play high school baseball. And then they both look at me and they say, well, how are you going to do it? And that was the solution, was let's see which coaches will give you a fair chance. And
What a great way to parent.
yeah,
I mean, I've met your parents, but I have a lot of respect for them with that, because it's, it seems like they gave you a long leash and they let you pursue these dreams, but they also were supportive when you needed them. And both your parents have interesting backgrounds. Tell us a little bit about them.
Yeah, my mother was born in North Carolina. Her father was a preacher, and so she spent a lot of time on the road. She inevitably ended up at NYU, and she became a journalist. Yeah. And she was told at a young age, and maybe this is in a way she identified with my path through baseball, through her path, because growing up in the South, in the 50s and 60s, when she said she wanted to be a journalist, her teachers looked at her and said, no, honey, you can be a teacher or you can be a nurse. For a Black woman, those were the options. Yeah. And she pushed against that, ended up at NYU and was a journalist for many years, and then met my dad and moved to California and ended up working in civil service. I mean, she worked for the mayor for 30 years in San Diego doing various things, some work with gangs, some work with the homeless and things like that, and was always a working mom. So in that way, I'm inspired by her as a working mom myself. My dad, completely opposite, was born in upstate New York and went to college in North Carolina, played tennis down there. And he was very much a hippie. He started hiking the Appalachian Trail and,
which would explain Chris.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And Malaika.
That's true. There's a little hippie in me too, though.
Yeah, there's a lot in Chris, though.
There's a lot.
What kind of preacher, was your grandfather?
Baptist, I think. Yeah. And it's interesting. Both my parents grew up in pretty religious families, but then, I'm probably a product of the era that they grew up in, but they kind of rebelled a bit and found each other by way of introduction from my dad's brother, who met my mom and was like, Tom, you need to meet this woman. And at that time he had already found his way to San Diego. So true, there was no FaceTime back then. So they were, almost just calling each other, and it was real long distance. And
how did they describe, what was the vibe like back then? Interracial marriage. It's not what it was, not what it is now.
Yeah, that's a great question and an interesting one too, because I obviously am in an interracial relationship, and even though we have challenges now, I can't imagine my parents. And they talk a little bit about it, and there was some family tension, which to me would have been the hardest part.
On whose side?
On both sides.
On both sides.
On both sides, yeah. It's just some level of not accepting their relationship, and so I'm sure that was tough. The social stuff you can deal with because it's outside. It's not but when your family looks down on that stuff, that's tough.
Wow.
But over time, the family, I don't know that you ever fully get over some of that stuff, but they came around. And so there wasn't that much tension by the time, at least I was old enough to remember things and interactions that there were any issues. But yeah, that was something they definitely had to deal with. And both of them were married before. And my mom was actually pretty close to Black Panther movement. And so, you got this kind of, if you want to call her former Black Panther, and this hippie hippie white guy and like find each other and it's love at first sight.
Wow.
And move to San Diego so they can be around a little bit more progressive folks. So
What, do you think, was that conscious? Like, hey, it's more progressive in California, we're going to go there?
So my dad kind of made his way there. He left North Carolina. His mother died early of breast cancer. So when he finished college, he spent some time in New Orleans and then decided he was going to San Francisco. He drove straight across from New Orleans, stopped in the middle of the night on the coast in San Diego to take a break before he headed north, and woke up and looked at the ocean and said, this is good. Why would I keep driving?
Never turned right.
Never turned right. He just stayed there. And so he was there already when he met my mom. And I mean, it depends on the person, but if you're going to pick New York City or San Diego, my dad was like, I'm not going back to New York. So either you come out here and we're together or kind of go our separate ways.
And you've said this, or I've read this before, where you couldn't believe that your mom acquiesced.
Yeah. I mean, she's stubborn. I mean, that's obviously no surprise to you all because you know me, but yes, she's stubborn. So I am surprised by that. But, you know, we all do crazy things for love. So as I'm staring at the McCarthys.
Yes.
So this idea of, you know, they say, okay, well, how are you going to do this? Right? When I think about that, it's kind of all this other advice that you were getting, like, you got to do this. It's like, it's almost akin to, though, when you get someone and you're like, hey, you're in college, you've got to go take this job and you got to ask about a 401k and you've got to ask about, you know, what kind of dental and vision and, you know, all these, you know, do you have a, pardon my French, a fucking bagel bar in the morning? And like, you know, does someone do all, it's like, look, people, sometimes, you know, the people around us, we mean well for them. We mean well for our kids. It's like, we want to spare people what? Everyone wanted you to just be safer. Like, this is the expected path, but it wasn't yours. And to me, the irony is that their point was, well, in order to do something for the long term, you've got to start down this path now to do this in college. And here you are, the longest standing member of the USA baseball team, male or female. I mean, there's a lot of irony in that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's, I think that, you know, it's people want to do what they think is best for you, but giving people the freedom and empowering them to follow their path is important. And there's a balance, right? Because as you get older, you've experienced things and you want to try to pass down some of that knowledge, but that's also restricting. And I think there's something to be said about letting people try and potentially fail. In my case, doors just kept opening that allowed me to continue, and I was confident in where I was kind of headed. I didn't know exactly where that was, but I was confident in at least the path that I was going down.
And just to go back, I think this is important as a parent, because your parents still were guiding. They were guiding you, right? They were facilitating. They were there for advice when you needed it, it sounds like, but they wanted you to make these decisions.
They absolutely did. And this is a story of my dad doing just that. My freshman year in college, it was like the first 2 weeks. So it's training camp. It's really before everybody shows up on campus, but all the athletes are there. And here's this San Diego girl shows up at the University of North Carolina, you know, heart of North Carolina, heart of the South. Like, I've never had sweet tea. I didn't know what a chicken biscuit was. Like, grits. Are you kidding me? Like, this is crazy.
It's foreign.
And we're working out hours and hours and hours a day. And I'm sore. I can't even sit on the toilet. Like, my legs hurt. And I'm just like feeling lonely and like overwhelmed, right? And I'm 18 and I'm far away from home. And I called my parents and I'm like, I don't think this was right. Like, I don't know. I just like, I want to go home. Like, where am I? And my dad, he's on the line. He's like, okay, cool. We'll come pick you up and grab your stuff and you can come home. And I was like, wait. That I don't think that's what I meant. And it just made me, he was like, going to be supportive. All right, cool. You want to bail out on this? Fine. And yet, like, in his own way, he made me rethink, like, no, I want to do this and I can do this. And,
so was that a trick? Did he know that was?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Like,
I don't think so. I think he was probably just like, hey, well,
I
we'll
feel
come
as a
if we
parent
need
now
you.
that I'm not that smart. So I feel like I would, if my kids are ever telling a story about something that I did that like inspired them or was like a moment where they felt like I did the right thing despite what they thought, I feel like it will be on accident. And
Well,
I'll look back and be
there's
like,
that too.
oh, well.
Okay, so what have you quit in life?
I'm sure there's something, but I don't know.
Your job, right? When you were
I
bartender.
mean,
Whoa,
but
people
I'm
move.
only like moving on and not like
I know.
just quitting something. I don't know.
I mean, I guess when my point is, I mean, I don't know, right? But I would want my kid to stick through something, certainly not, the very beginning. And if I could say, all right, you want to quit? Fine, I'll come and get you. Just, you just quit. It's okay. Just quit.
Well,
And
but he didn't. It sounds like he was
kinda like
loving
dig.
about it.
Yeah,
You're
a little
like,
dig.
you could play on it. Yeah. Well, and I'll give my dad some credit. He did know my buttons because I wasn't a rebel teenager, but I didn't always follow the rules, especially curfew. And so
What were you out doing?
I started hanging out with boys and I was like not coming home. It's like be home at midnight and at 1 o'clock they're calling, my boyfriend's mom saying, can you send her home, whatever. And so I kept doing this for a while. And one night I got home and my dad had left a note on the bed that said, you need to respect curfew. And if you don't, then you will no longer play baseball. And I was like, you can't stop me from playing baseball. And he looked at me and said, you want to bet?
Wow.
And so that was it. I started showing up on time and doing the things I needed to do. So he did know. So to your point, Jason, maybe he had a sense that like calling me out for quitting in that moment, even though I was emotional and felt vulnerable, would trump those feelings with this, no, wait a second. I'm not going to turn around and walk out of here.
So what was the sort of low point, if any? I mean, in this, and look, we're glossing this over. I mean, a little bit because you're an extraordinary athlete. I mean, it's just one of those things. You're born gifted. You're a hard worker. We know you well enough. We've known you for a long time now, and so that's just who you are. There are certainly certain pressures. There's things I can't possibly understand. There's being a girl in a quote guy's sport. There's growing up in one place and moving across the country for another. There's, all these people telling you what you should do and what you shouldn't do and all that. And then there's just the process of growing up, which is hard unto itself. I mean, what were the hardest parts or the hard parts?
There were a lot of hard parts just in trying to continue down the path despite all of the pressures. And some of them were put on myself because I was a girl in a guy's sport, but I felt like I always had to be perfect. So if I wasn't perfect, that was really difficult to deal with. And so I never had failures in a way that now looking back don't feel like they were still accomplishments, but there were things that at the time were really difficult to deal with and stressful. And I mean, I can remember after tryouts for the JV baseball team, coming home and just feeling like, I'm not sure I'm going to make this team. And getting emotional about it and going to my room and my mom coming in and trying to talk to me about it and just kind of leave me alone. And I ended up making the team, but I felt like I had to be so perfect that I just forgot that I was just another baseball player. And over time, that kind of weight is probably the hardest thing that I've had to deal with, is being in this sport where women just aren't as accepted, that we don't have the same opportunities. Now, it's changed some over the last 20 years, and MLB has started to invest more in the grassroots girls game, and there are other organizations that have helped it grow some. But when I was growing up in the 90s, I mean, there were there were the Silver Bullets. They were an all-women's team sponsored by Coors that was barnstorming, and they'd play men's teams. And actually some of my USA baseball teammates played for that team. And there was Isla Borders, who was the first woman to pitch professional baseball. And I remember tearing out of the Sports Illustrated picture of her and putting it on my wall. But outside of that, I didn't have a lot of women to look up to. And it just felt lonely. Like I was on this island trying to do something, and there was nobody else out there doing something similar. Now, it's a little bit different now because a lot of the girls who play baseball, despite being maybe the only one in their community who does it, they have social media. And so the community has grown nationally, and there's a way for them to connect and at least feel like they're not alone. I'm not saying they don't, but it was much more isolated then. And those are the things that were tough. Not any like one moment where I felt or failed, or I mean, there were losses that were devastating and things like that, but I don't count those as like...
We all have those.
Yeah, I mean, those are
you play
just...
team sports.
Exactly. But that stuff is like the stuff that I constantly carry and weigh on me. Even today, like just feeling that kind of weight, like always having to prove myself in a way.
And it's a team sport, and you didn't have many people to like relate to.
Yeah.
I mean, you get along great with your guy teammates, and
Yeah.
And I'm sure, but it's different, right?
It always feels different. I mean, it is. And the thing is, they don't have to worry about, the best way I can describe it is how I did, which is you feel like you have to be perfect. And the reality is, especially in baseball, but in most sports, you're not going to be perfect. But because I was a girl in a boys' sport, if I made one mistake, even though that was natural for a boy to do, I felt like it weighed extra on me.
Well, then people say like, oh, well, she's the only girl on the team, and like excuses are made, or, deal with.
The parents, and it's probably still true today, parents of kids in sports are worse than the kids themselves.
Right.
If you're listening out there, do not be that parent.
Try not to. Try your best not to be that
Okay,
parent.
so how was it? I mean, you went to UNC. It's obviously a storied athletic department.
Yeah.
Pretty awesome, right? I mean,
Super
Michael
awesome.
Jordan went there.
Well,
Yeah.
listen to this. On my recruiting trip, my volleyball coach, knew that I was a huge Michael Jordan fan, and so he takes me into Dean Smith's office, who has since passed, but he takes me in, and I get to meet Dean Smith, and we're talking, and it's awesome. And I know, like, at that moment, I was like, this is amazing that I get to sit here and talk to him. He's telling me these stories and all this stuff about Michael Jordan. He's like, wait 1 second. He goes into the closet, and he's digging around and whatever. He comes out, and he shows me a championship ring that Michael Jordan had given him as a gift. And I got to, like, put it on my finger.
Oh,
I was
wow.
like... And it was fall in Chapel Hill. This is my recruiting trip. The leaves are changing colors. It's beautiful. I'm like, this is the place. I'm flying home, and I'm telling my dad, I don't need to go on any of these other recruiting trips. This is where I'm going. This is absolutely it. And then I show up in August for training camp, and it's 95 degrees and humid, and we're no air conditioning in our gym. And I was like, this was a trick. Somebody tricked me. Let me go home. This is terrible.
And they probably made you run. Which
I have
hate.
asthma now somehow because it's so humid, and I've never ever run sprints in this. So.
Yeah.
Honeymoon was over.
It was
Yeah.
quick, really quick.
So did it feel more, I mean, compare the experiences. Did it feel more fair? I mean, is that even the right way to ask it? Like now you're competing with other girls against other girls or women. And as opposed to, you're not the only girl, girls can't play ball and all that stuff.
Yeah,
and
fair is not the right word. It actually felt like less pressure. It just felt like free, like, oh, this is not easy, because it was still competitive, and we played at a very high level, and including my teammates, but also teams we played. Like we competed in my senior year, made it to the Sweet 16. I mean, it was high level volleyball, but the individual pressure was very different than when playing with guys. And that's true too when I started playing women's baseball for USA, because I went out there and I thought, I've never played. In 2006, when I went out for tryouts, I walked on that field and realized I had never played a baseball game with other women. And it was just surprising to me to see so many women out there playing at such a high level. And I think, and I've heard this from some others, there are a lot of women who come out to play or try out for the team and have that same experience. Like it's totally different. They've spent their whole life like trying to carve out this path, and then they just like walk into this open arena and they're like, oh.
Okay, but so did you start to almost did you have to start to relish this role that you had for yourself? I'm the only woman on this team. Like, was there Stockholm syndrome almost over, that? Because at some point you've got to just own it. Right?
True. I never shied away from it, but I didn't miss it.
No,
I didn't miss it. I mean, I don't mind it. I don't mind it at all, but I didn't miss it. And to be fair, my career is in sports, in college sports, primarily. And so I'm around a lot of dudes anyway. Like, if I want to feel that way, I could just look around the boardroom and feel that way, right? So you're comfortable in that environment and you're comfortable in the other. Yeah, and maybe my experience playing baseball helped in a way to just be cool with that. I mean, it doesn't bother me all that much.
I think it's interesting that you're coming to the field and these other female players are also coming with the same experience of looking around and being like, wow, there's other women here. And
I think that's what, if I could change something in my lifetime, it would be that we have to have that experience, that there's actually more opportunity for girls and women to play baseball, that it's not that uncommon to have teams to watch other women play, whether that be on TV or live or whatever. It's going to take a while because the history of the game, women have been a part of the game since it started, but they've also been excluded from the game since it started, with the exception of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, which was it's the inspiration for a league of their own,
right, during the war.
Yeah, and so those women had an opportunity to actually play professionally, but outside of that, women have just been on the outskirts of the game.
Okay, so at what point did it become softball?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
So it was around, at this point, it's about 50 years, because Title IX is about 50 years old. I think actually Title IX will have its 50th anniversary next year. And around that time, there was a lawsuit against Little League Baseball. A little girl wanted to play for her Little League team, and they told her she couldn't. And Little League Baseball lost. And they were told they had to let girls play. That same year when they lost, they launched Little League Softball. And so they started socially just putting girls in Little League Softball. This is where you go. And it's grown. And that's really what has kept, and I don't say this in a way that is to take away from softball, because I think it's a fine game and there are plenty of people who enjoy playing it and playing it at a high level. And there are women playing it in the Olympics right now. But it allowed men or people in general to exclude girls from baseball and say, oh, but you can have this game. You can play softball. And I don't know if how much either of you have played both, but they're different.
They are so different. And I played both.
Baseball is the only sport, with the exception of football, American football, where the equivalent sport for women is actually a different sport, right? Basketball, we're okay with women playing basketball. We're okay with women playing soccer. Go down the list, and we're okay with it. Baseball's the one where we just can't get over it.
And it was that one lawsuit. I mean, they could have as easily have come up with a girls' baseball.
I'm trying to remember her last name now. Is Pepe something versus Little League Baseball?
Where was it? Do you remember?
I believe it was up in Pennsylvania. But now you're asking me details, and I'm terrible at details.
Well, I mean, it's so interesting because when we first met and I did the classic thing that everybody does to you. You said, I play baseball. And I was like, you mean softball? And you were like, no, baseball. And I was like, got it. I won't ever make that mistake again. I did the same thing. I grew up playing baseball. And then that same time around middle school, they basically were like, all right, girls go this way, boys go this way.
And you just do.
And it just did.
I mean, and it's harder to fight against that, right? Even as a parent, you want your daughter to fit in and be around her friends. And if she's
now
alone,
you're being the people that told you had to go play.
I'm justifying. I'm justifying what they're doing. I get what they're doing, but I also think that we should kind of pull back from that and just let girls play baseball. I mean, it to me is.
I didn't like the change. Funny. I thought it was harder for me to hit the ball. It was a slower game. Yeah. And I actually, I lost interest. I played it through middle school and then.
What's interesting, again. You say it's a slower game, and at a younger age it is.
Slow pitch, yeah.
When you get to college and above, softball is fast, and it's a short field, and it's much faster. And we have women on our USA team who come to us after they've finished playing college softball at a high level, and they have to actually slow themselves down because baseball, that size of field and all of those things is slower. I mean, still a fast game, but it's slower than softball when you're much closer. And when you're playing third base and a ball's hit to you, you have to field and throw. Mm-hmm. And in baseball, you field and throw. I mean, that's kind of the verbal example of how different it can be.
What's the fastest someone can throw a softball?
I don't know, but so I don't know.
Because to me, it's like it's the difference between a golf cart and a.
Well, no, but see, in softball, they're close. They can also take a few steps toward you, and so the equivalent. I think. I mean, I don't know the exacts, but the equivalent because of the distance, it's upward of like 90 to 100 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. And then it's also rising instead of coming down mm-hmm. like a baseball. There's a lot of differences. There's been Jenny Finch. She who was a softball pitcher. She pitched to a bunch of major league guys and struck them all out. And, like somebody fouled a ball off, and that was a big
Billie
deal.
Jean King,
yeah.
Oh.
I mean, but it was in softball. I mean,
tennis,
they don't do the reverse. And
so I mean, what's the right answer really? I mean, is it just burn softball down? I mean,
no, I don't think so at all. I think softball can exist, and as a matter of fact, there's men's softball, so mm-hmm. I don't know why there can't be both for
when Tom Cruise in A Few Good Men, wasn't that sort of the men's softball league?
Yes, there are softball leagues like that, and there's actually competitive
drinking leagues. There's drinking leagues. Some of our buddies are in those drinking soccer leagues, like your husband.
Yes, there is that. There definitely is that. What is the right answer? I don't know exactly, but I would say roughly it's this. It's that we let girls and boys play baseball co-ed till middle school age, which technically you can now, but it's just socially not that acceptable. And then at the high school level, we offer boys and girls baseball. And if there's interest, boys and girls softball, it's fine. And also at the collegiate level, and allow, professional leagues to develop as the pool develops. I'm not suggesting you just start a league just to start a professional league. That's actually one of the challenges now. People have said we should have a professional women's baseball league. I'm like, the talent pool right now isn't deep enough for us to do that, because you don't want to launch a league and then it not be a high level. You've got to provide the grassroots mm-hmm. and the middle ground for athletes to develop so that you can. And if you look at a sport like women's basketball, the WNBA didn't start until you had almost like demand for it, because college basketball, women's basketball, was getting so good. And so then you start the professional league and you have the women you need to have.
Okay, so you're like, here's the cool part. You're in sports, you're in the business side of this as well. I mean, when you look at it, I mean, how much of this is, okay, there's high quality of players and you need farm systems in essence to create high quality, versus the economics just aren't there as much, or will they be there, or can they be there? I mean, you remember when, who was it? Brainy Chastain, when the women USA won the World Cup.
I mean, 96.
Awesome moment, right?
Or 99, sorry.
Mia Hamm, there's a lot of women not enough, but there are women that have stood out, in these kind of sports, and it doesn't seem to have the staying power of the NFL or MLB or the NBA, or like, what's your take on all this?
So my short take is this, and it's that there is a general coverage bias, broadcast bias against women, and that there is actually demand for exactly what we're talking about, women's sports, women's professional leagues across sports, but we just don't get to see it. And then the people who aren't broadcasting it get to tell us that we don't want to see it. So, and again, I very much know that you can't just flip a switch, right? You can't just say, oh, let's start a women's professional baseball league, and then people start watching. But you also have to cover the professional sports, women's sports that we have now in a way that gives people access to watch it and see if there's demand for that kind of stuff.
Okay, so little known fact, or possibly slightly known fact. I grew up playing tennis. My mom was a hugely inspirational, she was a D1 athlete at Florida, go Gators, right? Best athlete in our family. Women's tennis has always been it's on par with the men's depending upon the personalities. What's the case on the team sports side where there's, the Olympics is the Olympics. I don't know if that's a good case, but how do we make these decisions?
I think that there's an acceptance around individual sports, and we see that, and we see the coverage reflect that. And then we assume that because it's covered and we can watch it on TV, there must be demand for it. We don't see that equal coverage even in media, like written media of women's sports. And so there's not a knowledge base, so it kind of feeds on itself. You don't know about women's basketball.
Meaning a volume of...
Yeah, or just a coverage of what is actually happening. And there's been studies and articles written about this, how much during the women's March Madness versus the men's March Madness, and how much coverage, what games are written about in newspapers and what consumers are getting access to is limited. Why? Is it because there's not demand, or is it because there's not coverage that there's not demand? Mm-hmm. There's not coverage. You don't even have a chance. You have to go dig it up. That's my opinion, is that we don't give it fair coverage, and so there's a general bias against women's sports. We don't want to watch it. There is actually demand to watch it. And slowly but surely, as access is getting a little bit more democratized, where you can go on your phone, and even if it's not on your TV, you can track something down, that's starting to bear out. Has
there been data to suggest that has democratized? I grew up and I remember the early stages of the WNBA, and I was like, this is just not it feels really slow to me.
What's it?
And this is a long time ago. And
yeah, have you watched the WNBA game?
I don't have TV really.
Yeah,
so I haven't watched. I've watched 2 NBA games.
There's
in the last
NBA
10 years.
players who show up to watch W games. I mean, it's good basketball. And you also have to remember, in many cases, if you're looking at basketball and you look at the opportunities that the time with which men generally have been able to evolve through a sport and learn through a sport, and then compare it to women who basically started to get the opportunities to do the same thing at the same level, 40, 50 years ago, on a real equal level, to actually train in the same way that men were able to train.
So what are good examples of specific sports where that's happened?
Well, basketball is a really good example. Title IX really influenced the availability of scholarships for women in basketball. And then you see the launch of the W. And I'm not arguing with you that it was a different game than the men's game. What I would say is, just because it's different doesn't mean it's worse. It's just different. And there's something about the women's game that some people enjoy watching.
Well, women's tennis, people prefer to watch women's tennis matches because the points are longer.
Yeah, do you watch women's tennis and you're like, this is
Well, I had an enormous crush on Steffi Graf growing up.
Yeah,
she was great.
No. But seriously, the actual game is more fun to watch, People
have said that about basketball too. And I will even say this. If you were to come and watch a women's baseball game, you're not going to see Shohei Ohtani come up to the plate and hit a 550-foot home run in our game. But are you going to see good baseball? Yes, you are going to see good baseball.
Good.
So it's a different game. It's not a worse game, I guess, is my point to your comment about the W being slower.
In the kind of A League of Their Own, right? Everybody knows this movie. And I want to take a point from that, Madonna's character. And it was like, hey, we need personality. I mean, in the universe of sports has gone that direction, right? Since free agency became such a huge thing, it accelerated it. I mean, Michael Jordan's larger than life, right? And as an individual on a team sport. In tennis or individual sports, there's even a greater role for the individual. So, the personalities of the tennis players, it's easier for that to shine
versus a team sport.
Versus a team sport where you're Roger Federer, you're Michael Jordan, you've got to you've got to bring that team along with you. You can't touch the ball every single time.
But how do you find out about the personality, right? Like what is your exposure to that sport and that athlete? It's dictated by what somebody decides to show you on TV or to cover on their website or whatever. That's my point, is that if you don't get exposed to it, how do you know if you like it or not? How do you know if you want to watch it or not?
Okay, but the counter to that right now, not to go back in time, is you've got people that are famous for being famous, right? They've done nothing. And so this ability for personalities to go direct to people, I mean, they're athletes of different whatever, but they're on Instagram with millions of followers, and then they have t-shirt companies and they have whatever, and it kind of drives awareness back to what else they're doing.
And many of the athletes in the pro sports, women athletes and men obviously, do that now on an individual basis. But that stuff doesn't change, even if you had a famous athlete playing for the W. There are, but if you had a very popular social media star who was playing for the W, then where would you go to watch it? You've got to get the league pass. You've got to seek it out, is my point.
But that's true with everything. I mean, but wouldn't that be great if there were a big?
I think it's different because you're fed some sports. You're fed the NFL. You're fed to a lesser extent MLB because it's more regionalized, and it's also spread out across a longer period of time. You're fed those things, and you, as a kid, you grow up around this. I mean, I grew up a Braves fan because TBS was playing the Braves at 4:00 on the West Coast because of the 7:00 game.
WGN had the Bulls.
WGN had the Bulls.
How awesome was that? Every Jordan game.
Oh, I was definitely a Bulls fan.
But here's my point. It's not a woman in sports, but nobody gave a shit about golf at a mass level until Tiger came along, and then all of a sudden everyone cared about golf and watching it on TV.
Well, that was a savior for them. You're right.
And so, the idea of a personality, and I mean,
there's lots of ways that these athletes show their personality. But I agree with you, Malaika, because you
have to create demand.
I don't know they're out there until I'm discovering them somewhere, being, like you said, being fed. And then I'll take that step to go to their Instagram and see who this runner is with the crazy hair, who is this person? And then you realize, wow, they're a really great athlete. I need to follow them. But yeah, it's still being held at that level.
And I'm not blaming any one person and saying like this is the source of. I'm just saying we only have access to certain stuff. And your point about personalities, I think, is a good one. But I would argue there are personalities out there that we just don't get to see. Mm-hmm. And even though you could discover them on social, you only discover kind of what's fed to you there anyway, too. We all know that. Like the things that show up on your feed are things that you're supposed to like that just kind of cycle in from what you've previously liked and all of that stuff. So how would a star women's basketball player get your attention right now?
They almost have to break the law or do something bad to get in the news,
How would you know about them?
It's like they have
Stumble
to
on them. Yeah.
They have to. Yeah. I know there's other ways to do it, but to really make a splash, it's like it almost has to be negative.
I mean, Mia Hamm got everyone's attention. The Williams sisters in tennis got everyone's attention. I mean, there's been underdogs. I mean, and this is really what we're talking about here, right? I mean, you've been an underdog in so many ways, but also just really gifted. It's just before the time of social media. I mean, sports is entertainment. Now, the thing about sports that is so great, which is why we love it so much, is because we learn so much playing it.
It's true.
Right? I mean, I learned so much on a team. And from, my earliest, the only time I beat my mom in a set of tennis was the last time my mom touched playing me in a match of tennis, right? But, she was the first person feeding me balls in the UF courts, and I grew up around that. And then, I played high school tennis, and I played basketball, and I played all these sports growing up, and I learned a ton. I mean, I learned I like my Calle Espanol that Emily loves, right? I learned it for the most part playing soccer in Texas. It was awesome, right? At a young age, right? I mean, you just got these people coming from all different walks. Everyone's got their swing. You got to come together and build a team. and you got a common mission, you got a common purpose. And there's something that is it's the best of life.
I agree with that. And that's why I argue so adamantly about the opportunities for girls and women, because all of those things that you're telling me, everybody deserves. Everybody deserves those things. And those lessons don't, just stop at like the rec level. Those lessons can be learned at a much higher level as those athletes go to that level, because not every athlete ends up in college and playing tennis like you or playing professionally. But to have those opportunities keep athletes in sports. And that's one of the problems. Youth sports participation is going down, and it's tough for women specifically, because you look at the path and you're like, well, where am I going with this? What am I doing with this? Let me go somewhere else and spend some time and develop skills or whatever. So,
but it's been proven that it keeps kids out of trouble. It keeps them in school. It keeps them, reading, and gives them other opportunities. And it's not just gender at this point. It's at the early ages. It's socioeconomically, it's helping a lot of kids have something productive to do and teaching them how to get along with a bunch of different types of people.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the college level, the number of women in sports is not going down, is it?
I don't think it is, because there are almost like a set number of
There's
scholarship
quotas,
levels.
yeah.
Whoa.
And you, if you don't,
I only use college and professional as aspirational things that keep kids in sports for longer.
Yeah.
Just kind of
I got
looking
it. Because you need,
Yeah.
like the Mia Hams, and I keep coming back to that because I just remember that team was such a great team, and it was just sort of inspirational. You can see, you could just feel girls watch that and say, oh, I want to do that.
Yeah.
Right. And we need more of that.
Yeah. That is seeing is believing. Absolutely. And if girls can see other women playing sports, they want to be an athlete. They want to keep playing sports.
So the economics of it at the college level is basically, though, if you're at Florida or if you're at Ohio State or you're at UNC, I mean, at UNC, I assume that the men's basketball program subsidizes basically everything. In Florida, it's the football team. In Ohio State, it's definitely the football team. And like, that's okay. To me, I'm kind of like, look, there's a lot more opportunity for a lot more people. And if that's all that there were, and if everything about sports were just making money, especially at a college level, like it's not quite right.
Yeah, and I'm not at all against the college model and how they operate their budgets so that they can offer a variety of sports. And I appreciate every opportunity I got. And I mean, there were a few occasions where we packed our stadium, but on most occasions it was, 500, 1,000 fans coming to watch volleyball players. 500 fans at an Emory tennis match that I played at would have been, I mean, they would have written a lot of articles about
y'all
that.
Y'all can talk track meets. No one goes to fucking track meets. They're like, it's too long. It's hot.
So, it's like when you go back in time, like nobody was showing up for lots of sports to the degree that they were showing up when Michael Jordan showed up, and he was kind of a trendsetter, and all the wages went up, and all of the there's trendsetters. And is it just the case where women are just a generation or two behind, and it has to catch up, or how does it? Look?
I think that's the opportunities for women have been a generation or two behind, and so I think yeah. Over time, I think we'll see some catch up to that, or I hope we will. I mean, you look at the NBA right now, you've got guys flying charter jets and the W players, and I'm not saying there's a quick fix to this, but the W players are flying economy class.
Coach,
and like it's still different. It's still different, I guess, is my point, and I think eventually it will. And it's not because of skill level.
With women in baseball, it feels a little chicken and egg. Like, I know you said, like, hey, let them be co-ed through Little League, and then, at some point come up with boy and girl teams for high school. But like, do you start in college first? Because that's where they have more funds.
One of the things I have been a proponent of recently is the idea of creating club teams, women's club teams at the collegiate level. Mm-hmm. Doesn't require a lot of funding. You couldn't do it at every school, but not every school has a club team for every sport anyway. But if there were a certain number, we'll call it 5-10 schools who really committed to just supporting a women's club team and then having some sort of national championship where they all get to play against each other. Something like that, I think, could be the spark, right? And it doesn't require a lot of money. It would require girls and within sort of our community sort of commit to going to these colleges. So there's logistics, I think, to doing that. But if something like that could happen, that's the start. And then that provides that aspirational step for those younger girls to say, okay, I might not be able to play varsity baseball, but there are a couple colleges where I could go play club baseball, and I want to do that. And so I'm going to play through Little League, and then maybe they will have to still play on their boys' high school team, but I'm going to have this opportunity to go play club at a college.
Right. And are the number of girls that are able to play on the boys' high school teams, is it growing since you were in high school?
I think so. There's a rough number out there that says there's about 100,000 girls playing high school baseball. I don't know the source, but it's growing. It's not that uncommon anymore. I mean, still within any given community, you're likely only to see one or two. And there's some opportunities. There's like travel ball teams that have started to pick up. There's a couple here in Florida, things like that are giving, I think, the outlets that girls need to
I'm thinking about your letter again. And what made you include the football coaches in that?
I thought it would just be a good gauge because I was pretty sure that I hadn't heard of any girls making baseball teams, but if a coach or, the coach on the football team was friends with the coach on the baseball team, maybe there was some openness to it because they had seen it before. I don't know. It just felt like the likely answer to baseball was no, but maybe there had been a girl on the football
you know what
team.
we need? We need you to star in the baseball version of Quarterback Princess.
I don't even know what Quarterback Princess is.
I don't either. I don't like the sounds of it, though.
What? No, guys, I'm telling you, you're going to go watch this. I love this movie. It's probably a Disney movie, but, it's not cartoon. But it has a female in it who joins the high school football team. And she's becomes a star. But it's all the typical things you're talking about, like not fitting in at first, feeling like, she's got a target on her back, parents and other people don't want her there. And she ends up saving the day.
The funny thing about those sports movies that have women or girls playing and doing stuff like that, playing on a boys team, I feel like they always pick the actress who is the worst athlete. And so then the whole time, all I do is watch a movie or the show and critique them like, man, she cannot throw a baseball. She cannot kick a football, whatever.
Right.
Hey, one thing we can kind of commiserate on is these actors that go do these tactical movies. I can't watch them.
But
right?
I was saying
Very few
you
and
could
far
star in it,
between.
Malaika. You could be the star, and then we'd solve all the problems. But I want to talk about a different problem. And this is something that I remember when we went to Cuba, and we went sightseeing, and there was this field off to the side, and there was just kids playing in a sandlot, going out, afternoon, or before they have to go back home for dinner. And you were watching this with nostalgia in your eyes. And I don't see that anymore, at least in the United States. I see it in some other countries that I've lived in, especially in some parts of South America, but that's mostly soccer. But where are all the kids playing sandlot baseball?
They're all playing organized sports or on, what do you call them? Play dates or whatever when you have to schedule to go play. It's so weird. I think it's the worst. Kids don't go out and play anymore. And I do think that's detrimental to sort of the youth sports system because everything is structured. Everything is, we're going to practice this many hours. We're going to play games. We're going to do travel ball. We're going to have your 10-year-old play 110 games in a year. It's all crazy to me. I think kids should go out, especially at a young age, play a lot of different sports, play them freely so they get to learn themselves, their bodies. They just get to learn all those lessons. I mean, I think we'd be way better off. I mean, it's what it is? It's money.
Yeah.
Everything's turned into, the youth sports system is turned into money. How are we going to make money on travel ball? We're going to sell them lessons, and then we're going to sell them gear, and then we're going to do this and that. It's crazy.
There's some parental complicity that goes along here too,
Yes.
right? The assumption of zero risk for Johnny and Jane, right? Like they can experience no failures and no risks and no bruises and no cuts ever. And I got to know exactly where they are every second of every day. And the problem is that you're actually not prepared for life as well. And so that's why you get kids that grow up a little bit more free to go, there's some risk to it, right? You have some skin in the game, and occasionally bad things happen, knock on wood, but your kid is more resilient, prepared. And I kept thinking as you were talking about this, the Economist did this article about China trying to spend so much money to win the World Cup and to be so good at soccer, right? And meanwhile, you've got kids on the street in Brazil that are growing up kicking some half soccer ball around, if that, right? And the creativity element, the imagination, all the intangibles.
And what you talk about is being in love with the game.
Yeah.
Like that's what kept you engaged.
And you don't get
all
burned
that time.
out, and you have fun, and you're less inclined to get injured because you're not just doing repetitive movements because you're doing these structured practices, and it's better for all. You guys keep stacking my soapboxes higher and higher with all these questions.
Yeah. Well, I want you to stand tall, Malaika.
You caught me off guard with that. Usually it's kind of like there's kids running around and we'll BS for a couple minutes.
I know. Yeah, I think we're trying to recreate a little bit of how we grew up, or maybe how our parents grew up too, in this neighborhood. We show up at your house unannounced.
It's not really unannounced because we can hear you guys coming from about 2.5 blocks away.
and your kids are little, so you still have to be with them. But eventually, we'll have this like highway between us.
Yeah,
I
look forward to that.
The kids can just meet up and play a pickup game of wiffle ball or whatever, and
I hope so.
Great. So you broke a window in a parked car. Like that's how you learn a good lesson.
Give you a stern talking to, but
I mean,
it's okay.
They'll all be afraid of Jason.
No, but it's like those are good lessons to learn, and there's, like you said, there's not this, I had to drop you off and here's this and that. It's nothing against some of those. It just has its time and place, right? And I think after watching that movie In Search of Greatness, that all these athletes say it's right around that time between 5th and 6th grade, or, right around middle school, where it's like, okay, it's time to start getting some lessons, or it's time to start playing on an organized team. But before that, the people, like these athletes, they just wanted to go out and do the sport because they loved it.
Chris and I talk about this all the time, but you just have to get comfortable with the fact that your kid is just going to be average.
Yes.
And then if your kid ends up being a superstar, awesome. That's great. But let's just all be real and kind of just deal with the fact that our kid's probably going to be average, and it's going to be great, and we're going to love them, and they're going to do some cool things in life, and we're going to be proud of them, and that's great.
And we're just here to keep them alive.
And then occasionally, yes, yours especially, and then occasionally a Michael Jordan or whoever will walk down the street, and you'll be like, that kid is amazing at whatever sport.
Or the superpower is something else.
Or the superpower.
And it's not what we would say, oh, I want you to be this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And kids have to find their own path. This is hard.
Yeah.
They have to sort of find their passion and their love. And then, I really, really loved basketball, but I got cut from the team right when I moved here, right? There's no Michael Jordan redemption story in this. This is just that was the end. And then I played tennis and I really, really loved it. And I worked really hard. Really hard. We were talking earlier about there's 5 things in your life and you can only have 3 of them.
That's right.
What are they? Let's hear them.
It's work, family, fitness, friends, and sleep.
You can only have 3 at one
3.
time.
Yes. This is not my saying. Let me put that on record.
So mine was only 3. In college, there was sports and grades and girls. I got 2 of them, right? I had lots of sports and I had really good grades. And I couldn't get good enough. It's just not something, and I was okay, but it's that's not my path, and my parents didn't know what to make of me at some level. And I feel like more parents, I just want my kids to find their path And so you found your path.
I think what you're hitting on too is that as a parent, you can't determine what that path is for your kid. You have to let them find it if you want them to embrace it, be successful at it, love it, whatever. Like they've got to find that. If you try to kind of script it for them.
Exposure is good, but 30-minute, $200 sessions with, the leading experts are not going to do it. And that's why, there was this great, I kept thinking about this as well as we were talking. There's this article that JFK wrote while he was president-elect called The Soft American in Sports Illustrated. And he basically said, the next generation's wars are won on the playgrounds today. Mm-hmm. And, there was this threat to America's security based upon just this softness that was going on. Well, does that sound relevant still? To me, it does. And there's this element of, look, we've got to have stronger communities. We've got to have kids out running around in team sports. I never really loved the individual element of tennis. I love the team part of it. And we've got to have kids going out and playing team sports. And oh, by the way, we need to have this on the male side and the female side, not just because it's the right thing to do or out of some altruism, but because it's best for everyone's future as citizens.
Mm-hmm. I 100% agree with that. You make a good point. It's girls and boys, and as long as we approach it equally, I think we're in a good place. And it's endemic to our culture, like physical activity. We need it. Like let's put that back in a way that's not so scripted. Let's let kids get outside. Let's let them do those things.
You know what we need to do, just personally. We need, when we go to the beach for our happy hours, we need to just bring a wiffle ball set.
Or soccer ball.
Or like we do. Yeah, bring soccer ball, but just draw some bases and just play a little fun game and just, let them know. Because my kids don't even know which ball. They always say the wrong ball. They call a soccer ball a baseball, and
that's okay. My Birdie saw a picture in the magazine of a basketball court with basketball players, and she was like, "Mommy, baseball!" And I was like, "Girl, you got it. Everything is baseball. Everything is baseball."
Yeah. So you wrote a book about Birdie and Kit, right? There's a sequel now, right?
Well, not
or in
yet.
The works.
Yeah, I mean, I feel guilty. I've got to write something for my second daughter.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote it because when Birdie was first born, she's 3.5 now, I was reading the standard board books, the Hungry Caterpillar and Brown Bear and
Goodnight Moon.
Those are actually good ones because some of the other ones I'd read and say, this is terrible. I can't handle it, even though it takes me 36 seconds to get through it. I just felt like it was important, and this thread has gone throughout our conversation, that girls at even that age, at 6 months old, get the message that they can do things that guys can do. An affirmative message in that regard, especially because they don't have as many role models, and I think that's changing. I mean, we have a woman who's a vice president now, and there are, in the sports world, lots of women who are breaking the glass ceiling and doing some great things. I just felt like the message could start earlier. And so the book is a very simple book. Birdie sees men playing baseball, and she knows she can too, and she practices all the skills, and eventually she makes the USA Baseball Women's National Team. So it's very simple, but I just thought it was an important message for young kids. And I hope it inspires not just girls, but boys too.
Yeah.
It's important.
Yeah, we read that to our boys.
So back to sort of role models, female role models for women. I mean, I'm asking. How do you fill the vacuum? What should the role model look like? How do we present this holistically?
I don't know if there's any one example. I think, though, we have to be conscious and just think about how women who are successful are portrayed, right? And you were talking earlier about personality. Well, what does that really mean? And it's not one thing. I don't know how to exactly answer your question, but I think we just need to be conscious of the way that we highlight people and why they are famous or popular or, interesting. And that can help us get to a better place in terms of how we look at women. And
so who's a good example? Who's doing it right?
For me, I look up to women within the industry, like a Kim Ang, who's the GM of the Marlins, or those are the type of people that I look up to. They're not necessarily people that others would know about, but
mean, I think
that's like,
Venus Williams does a great job with her account. I mean, I follow a lot of female athletes. I just actually started following a skater who's participating in the Olympics and following some surfers that are getting in the Olympics for the first time. So, things are happening, but I know it must be frustrating to you to see, a lot of these other sports, which I'm glad that they're getting an opportunity, but it's like women's baseball's not.
Yeah, we get the short end of the stick in most things.
I mean, I just think they should have women's baseball too. I mean, I'm not against having more of these things.
More is okay.
Well, more is okay.
I mean,
okay.
if you want kids, people to be engaged and kids to watch the younger, then you gotta give them what they want. But can there be surf teams and skateboard teams in every high school in America? No, impossible, right? Just based on geography. But can you have a baseball team in every high school? That should be a goal, right?
And it's pretty easy too because you already have the facility. So there's not a whole lot of extra cost just to say, hey, let's also have a women's team or girls team.
Rotate the practice and the game schedule.
That was our argument too with the Olympics. It obviously hasn't worked because we're not in the Olympics, but you already have the facility, right? You already have a baseball field that you have to build for the men's team. So especially with a game like baseball where it's something that in our culture, everybody seems to maybe not love, but appreciate.
America's past.
But they know it.
Yeah. Everybody appreciates baseball.
Yeah.
So why don't we crack it open and let girls and women play?
Yeah.
And participate. Like, it's our game. Like,
yeah.
Women are part of America too.
Thank God.
Yeah. So that's a great argument, saying that the facility is already there. Minor league stadiums.
It's a practical argument,
Yeah.
which does matter. There's
What's the argument against not having women's baseball? I mean, I'm putting
don't
this
know.
on you, and you're not.
I don't know.
This is
There's
not your
already
world.
softball. I mean, you hate to hear that, but it's like now you're going to split the talent pool between softball and baseball.
Is there minor league women's softball?
There's a professional softball league
Okay.
that operates in the summer. And then there's this group called Athletes Unlimited that just started last year with a different sort of professional model, but they've done softball and then volleyball as well. So there are opportunities. Again, you don't see them on TV, but they're there. They don't make a ton of money, but it's 3 months season, and a lot of the high level softball college players will go on to play there.
Usually these things, they do become kind of labor of love for people doing them, for people promoting them, for people, organizing them. And it's kind of like support your local band, support your local restaurant, support your local shop. I mean, you have to do that in order to get it to the next level. I mean, legislation isn't going to solve everything. I mean, I'm for more, right? Like, I think more people need to be on more fucking team sports and off their phones. Less time on forums, more time out sweating with other people at the Sandlot or wherever. I'm for all of this. And so, look, I think it's great, and keep fighting the good fight.
I'll try.
So what's your advice for the next generation of women athletes, or just in general?
So much pressure in the advice question. I feel like I'd be remiss not to say follow your passion, because that's sort of where we started in this whole conversation. You've got to do the work because nothing comes for free, and get outside and play, because even as an adult, we do that on the weekends, and it's good for you. It's good for your body. It's good for your mind. It's good for your soul. So that would be my advice.
Amen.
This has been a high production episode of Glorious Professionals. Anyway, last words, sweetie. They're yours.
No, they're Malaikas.
They're
I
Malaikas.
guess.
Oh, well, thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to talk to you. This was awesome. This
Thanks
really
for
was.
coming. Thanks for riding your bike in the rain.
Yeah, and this high-end podcast studio that we have.
Awesome.
Thanks, y'all.